Hello and good morning, everybody. My name is Michael, and I'm having the pleasure today morning to represent the easy part of the equation, to represent the not-so-sexy part of the equation. I'm representing the Global Digital Machine Room for Boehringer Ingelheim. I'm heading an organization called Human Pharma Services. Before getting into the weeds of the content, let me spend a few minutes on who is Boehringer Ingelheim. We are one of the top 20 pharma organizations worldwide, and we have a purpose that is called transforming lives for generations. And let me stress one aspect in this purpose. It's about generations. This company is fully family-owned, which makes a huge difference also to my experience coming from Novartis, working for other pharma companies. The strategic thinking is by definition very long-term. And this means that Boehringer is probably able to experiment in ways that is not easy to achieve in other organizations of that size and scale. And when Boehringer says generations, they mean generations. Just to give you one data point, this company is founded in a small village in Germany called Ingelheim in 1885. So this is taking the organization to almost 140 years of family-owned business. So this is resilience in action, I would say. You can imagine that there were many crises in between that this organization has survived successfully. 3 more data points to give you an idea who we are. More than 53,000 employees worldwide in the meantime. We are investing into R&D. Last year, more than 5 billion euros, and the net sales has reached more than 24 billion euros in 2022. So, now, before digging into the digital machine room in a little bit more detail, let me ask you a guesstimate question. So, how many service requests did Human Pharma Services process in 2022? A, was it 97,000? Was it 128,000? Or was it even 173,000? I give you 2 more data points here. One is the services in scope for this question is the production and the maintenance of all digital assets worldwide. And the other data point is we are supporting no less than 98 countries globally in line with the globally harmonized model. Now, why is it important, to my understanding, to have such a global infrastructure in place moving forward? I could spend some minutes on such a slide that probably all of us could present here the same way. So let me take a little bit of a different spin here. Let me talk about the patient for a second. What we see here on the left-hand side is a patient with an acute outbreak of a GPP flare, which is a rather rare disease, a skin disease, obviously. And until recently, there was no treatment available. Now there is. And the simple fact that now there is, this information needs to flow. This information needs to arrive at all the stakeholders that are relevant to help these kind of patients, because every day in the life of this patient that these patients don't get treatment, they are suffering. They are suffering like crazy, so information needs to travel freely and quickly. So what is an often misused phrase around right content, right channel, right time is getting true and deep purpose. So that's my first key message here. Patients don't have time. Speed is critical. The second is around trust. And when I talk about trust, I don't mean trust that we have in our spouses, that we have in our mommy or whoever. Trust is about reliability and predictability of behavior. And we have some wonderful examples globally of companies you may like or may dislike, that is not relevant, that have built global brands while fully accommodating local nuances that are critical to be embraced in all different geographies, very diverse globally. And you need to have an organization in place, you need to have a governance in place that is able to do this, to build a global brand that is able to build trust on a local level. That's not an easy piece to do because assets, key messages, and so on are getting diluted in no time if you don't have a consistent delivery in place. So that's my second key message here. Trust is key. And moving forward, for Big Pharma, this is getting more and more important. So this kind of global delivery structure is able to achieve what is needed along these following 4 topics. That's not complete, but they are very important to my experience. So you need to reuse and you need to localize content instead of reinventing over and over again, thereby losing consistency and traceability. The next thing is you need to follow brand guidelines and global design frameworks so that you get the consistency in place that is helping with trust building and recognition. The third one is you need to maintain the asset integrity, meaning all the metadata needs to flow together with the assets end to end. And this comes with a global tagging framework and all the rest of it, because the moment you lose this integrity, you lose the capability to measure and to learn, so there will be no insights. And lastly, you need to have an infrastructure in place that is enabled to deliver the content at the right time to the right people. And thanks to Adela yesterday, I learned that Bill Gates triggered this already in the 90s. Content might be king, and I don't disagree, but without consistent delivery, content is nothing, right? You need to get the message through the door, so at least delivery is Kong. So the new king in town, I believe, is King Kong. The king is not good enough. So let me share you a very brief example of King Kong in action. This is an initiative that we have supported with our IMETA region, so Indian, Middle East, Turkey, Africa. And that was about rejuvenating what is a rather mature portfolio, which is suffering from lack of attention, lack of support from the corporate people, and so on. So the field force was not so much energized, not so much motivated, but still, this established portfolio is still a very critical business driver in these geographies. So this was refreshed, and we were taking it, and at the heart of this initiative, there were 3 new e-detailers that we have localized across a very diverse set of 69 countries, not even in 4 months' time. So this is very fast, and this helped to enable an ROA in this geography that I would wish to have on my private portfolio, to be honest. So, couple of success factors here. What is critical, and I mentioned it before, you need to have localized content. You cannot ignore the local nuances. What is also important, you need to have very consistent execution, and you need to do this fast with a quick turnaround, and you need to have the sheer capacity in place to be able to implement such kind of huge initiatives. So, and King Kong in Boehring Ingelheim, as I mentioned, is called Human Pharma Services. And now that I have spent a couple of minutes on why I believe this is more and more important also in a pharma environment, let me spend a little bit of time on how we do it in Boehring Ingelheim. Again, let me start with a couple of success factors. What is important, you need to be a trusted partner to the business. And while Boehringer decided to do this mostly in an outsourced model, the governance, the process definition, the operating model design is all owned by BI internal colleagues that are working side by side with the business and that are managing these external partners on behalf of the business. The next thing is this model is hyper efficient in terms of costs and speed and can deliver quality. What is also very critical, and BI took decision to invest into this, is what we call a service layer, which means we have a local hands-on collaboration layer in place in all the important, in all geographies worldwide. so that the business doesn't need to work, in our case, with offshore India directly. There's a little bit of hand-holding because this bridge between the local markets and offshore India can sometimes be a little bit too much. While the business needs to focus on other things, there's a facilitation layer in place that we have built. And then we are purely execution-focused, which means we are enabling the strategy and we are running the machine room. Talking about the machine room, what all needs to be in place to have that up and running like a well-oiled machine? There are a number of critical elements that need to be seamlessly connected. So all the campaigning need to be executed in line with the strategic and tactical planning. All the content that fuels the campaigns need to be planned and in place across all the channels that you want to deploy. And very important, you need to prepare whatever you want to deploy in the markets for measurement. So there need to be a full measurement system in place with a proper tagging that is consistent, global to region to local. And only then you will be able to measure what you want to understand and to drive the insights from what you are doing. Now let me take a little bit of a technical view on this, why I believe that this global factory that we are running is a very critical enabler that can help to connect all the dots that need to be connected end to end. And let me take a swim lane approach here, looking at global, local, and about the global factory. So everything starts with planning, of course. The corporate TAs are sitting with the focus markets, with some selected additional markets. Co-planning is happening. What is probably not very intuitive here, the global factory has a seat at the table already now, starting to put the topics on the table that are critical to have a seamless globalization approach in place later on that makes the experience end-to-end. Then we are getting more into the weeds when the content is being developed. Of course, co-development is happening. And from a global factory perspective, from a globalization approach perspective, there are at least 3 topics that need to be addressed. One is, how do we want to operate in this globalization approach? Do we want to go agile? Do we want to go waterfall? Do we want to do a hybrid? Whatever it is, whatever makes best sense. What is the objective of the campaign later on? Then we need to agree the guidelines. For example, what is our domain strategy? What is our search engine optimization approach? What is our tagging framework that we need to put in place? And we front load all this process already now, and then we talk about governance. So what is the level of local flexibility that we want to allow? How much top-down governance and how much top-down rigidity do we need to put in place? And that depends on the kind of campaigning that you want to do. And then very early on, we are getting ready also for the approval process so that the approval process is not becoming a bottleneck. Then obviously approval is happening. We are moving into production. We are deploying all the assets, making them readily available across all the channels, across all the regions and the markets. We keep obviously all stakeholders informed. The campaigning is happening, the delivery is happening, the measurement is happening, so that finally the analytics can happen and the insights can be fed back to the global level so that the corporate TA colleagues start learning from what they have triggered initially. And on the back of this perspective, I hope we can all agree that the global digital factory is uniquely positioned to coordinate this end-to-end journey from global to regions to local. Because there's no other entity in the organization that actually has such a global infrastructure in place. Let me give you also the reason why I believe this is true, this statement, which might be a little provocative. The way this is established in Boehring Ingelheim is, as I mentioned already, we have a service layer organization in place, which at first sight is an overhead investment that you typically don't want into these kind of shared services organizations, but that's an investment that is paying off big time. And in Boehringer, we are talking about 8 service account leaders, globally distributed, that are all peers within the same team, reporting to the same manager. Hence, there is very close alignment. This team is collaborating literally on a daily basis. And together with these service account leaders, we have from our external partners, who are Indigene in this case, we have globally 16 delivery managers lined up that are also co-located in all these different markets that are making sure that everything arrives in the market in time, in quality, even when it comes from offshore India or from a nearshore location that is closer to the markets. So this is very critical to have so that we are able to bridge the gap here. Let me give you an overview of what the entire Human Pharma Services organization looks like. So to enable all this, we have a captive center of BI operated out of Barcelona, which we have grown from 20 people end of 2019 to almost 200 people end of this year. They are looking into the more sophisticated digital marketing operations, where we bring a little bit more flexibility to the table to enable these localization approaches. We have also started to support our medical affairs operations colleagues. Then the real heavy lifting is happening, as I mentioned, with our strategic partners from Indigene in offshore India and Bangalore. They are doing the coding required of worldwide all emails, all e-details, all websites, and all banners to really make sure that we have the economies of scale in place, that we have competitive pricing in place, and that we are able to deliver at the required capacity. All this is enabled by a team that we call service operations. Those colleagues are making sure that the agency management is in place, that the production partner support is in place. They are running a team of service owners who are cross-functionally accountable that all the global services are delivered in a very harmonized and seamless way. And they are having all the measurement systems in place so that we are able to track down what we are doing. And the latest kit on the block, which I'm very excited about, is we are doing an upstream integration of this production house, which means we are going into the space of creative factory also. And this means that we are taking care moving forward of everything that we call below the line creative work. And you would be surprised how much of the creative work this actually is. So initial analytics in-house is talking about almost 70% of all the creative agency spend that might move into our factory model. Yeah, these are the very early analysis, but imagine the room for savings here without really compromising on quality, because what you are doing is actually overpaying, yeah, for stuff that you should not pay for. Let me close with some key learnings, some takeaways here. To do something like this, it's very critical to have very strong corporate sponsorship in place, because you are significantly changing the way you are expecting the business to operate, obviously. Yeah? And without top-down sponsorship, that's not happening. If you don't have a captive center in offshore India or any similar location, you should partner with an agency that is able to deliver, that has done this before, and that is not only able but also willing to co-invest into such a journey, because you will hit many roadblocks, and some of them will require a little bit of investment, and you don't want to carry these investments alone. So find a strategic partner to do this together with you and bring the experience to the table. Very important also, you need to strike the right balance while not losing the economies of scale that need to remain intact, because you want to have the business case delivered, but you cannot, as I mentioned earlier, you cannot ignore the local nuances. What you also need to maintain is the relative competitiveness versus local agencies, because this is the argument you will hear 100 of times day in, day out. My local agency will do it better, quicker, and cheaper. You are faced with this 98 times as you are supporting 98 countries. Yeah? So you cannot compromise on this. You need to be able to compete on speed, cost, and quality. And then what is also important, and why I believe such a global infrastructure is uniquely positioned to enable this globalization journey, you need to ensure global visibility and steering to maintain the consistency of what you are doing in terms of global to region to local campaigning. These are the key takeaways. Now let me close the loop to this one. Any opinions? 97,000 service requests? Raise your hands, please. Well, it's probably too obvious, no one. So, it's actually 173,000 service requests that we were processing in 2022, which means more than 700 requests per working day in an average. So this is unique scale, this is true scale, this is truly global approach. And with this, I see I'm at time, and I thank you for your attention. We have 1 more minute for questions, maybe? I see some.
Yeah, I have it worked afterwards. Thank you very much. Very insightful. In terms of scope, just to understand with a very concrete question. So typically digital factories would do e-detailers, customized emails. If me as a business owner, I need a podcast, for example, would I also go to your team?
That's a good question. The moment you want to scale it, yes. The moment you are experimenting and piloting, yes. If you want to potentially scale it later on, so that we can start being part of this journey. And I give you an example. We are actually partnering again with iMeta on an initiative that is big in Dubai, Metaverse. And we have delivered our initial use cases, and none of this is happening at scale currently. But we are still investing, co-investing into this to start embarking on this learning journey. And my accountability together with my organization will be to industrialize so that we can create more and more use cases, even in the metaverse across the globe, while running a globally standardized framework without ignoring the local nuances. So we need to be party very early on in such processes. So the answer is yes.
Thank you. And a second really fast one, how is this model funded, the shared services?
So far it's centrally funded. However, we are changing the financial model as we speak, and we do it in a way that we still incentivize the service innovation piece. So the initial 2 years of any new service stays centrally funded so that markets, pioneering countries are coming on board early and quickly because it is paid for. I don't like the term that it's free. Nothing is for free. Someone always pays. Yeah, that's very important. But it's not the markets that need to pay. For everything that is mature, that is measurable, delivering cost, speed, and quality is going to a allocation into the local P&Ls.
Thank you. It was a very helpful presentation. I can compare with the certain shared services operations that we are also doing. But there is a stark difference that I see. We are building this similar capabilities offshore in-house. Mm-hmm. And often the hesitation is the facilitation part that you were mentioning. How do you manage the facilitation between the business and the offshore outsourced agencies? Because there is a lot of gap that, or in quality or else lost in translation in terms of requirements. And it's kind of a struggle, and it sort of often fails, or there is a challenge in terms of bridging that gap. Yep. And how have you managed to sort of facilitate that so seamlessly, supporting so many countries?
That's a very key element, and maybe I was not clear enough during my presentation. This is what we call the service layer, which is an overhead cost that we are investing in, where we have corporate resources co-located in all the markets across the globe, so in all the markets, in all the big geographies across the globe, which are corporate roles that are mandated to drive the corporate agenda in all these geographies. And they are bridging what you referred to rightly so as a big gap between the local brand teams, the marketing teams, and the offshore India operations. And this is really critical because you don't want to have the brand teams directly interacting, at least not during the first 3-4 years. Yeah? There's an element of getting used to it. There's an element to start appreciating what this brings to the table, but you need to help with this learning curve, and that's the investment Boehringer is taking into this service layer organization. Very critical. It's corporate roles. It's not local roles. It's corporate roles that are co-located in the markets. That's very key.
And this is, again, a central headcount, if I may. Okay.
That's also very important. The markets don't need to bring the headcount. The corporate is bringing the headcount.
Great, thank you.
Thank Congratulations. We are joking with Casper. This is German excellence at its best. That's a really fabulous factory.
Machine room.
I would have two quick questions. What's the ROI or the target ROI of the whole organization? Is it including the US as well? So how do you deal with the US, who are always a challenge for Europeans, right? And the other one is, did you achieve a reuse rate? I imagine you're measuring a lot of things. Did you achieve a reuse rate, which is for us one objective, that we avoid having 60 times the same picture of the same pill, and we have only one?
So we are measuring ROI in terms of savings, and it is confirmed that the savings case is intact. Yeah, on the back of the 2021 scope, which was significantly less than what we are running today. For example, US was on board only in fractions. We are bringing double-digit million euros of savings to the table for the scope that we are operating, so this is confirmed. The US is on board, surprisingly enough, but they were the last ones to really scale. But it required a little bit of over-investing into the US, which is fair. If the US is 40 to 45% of your entire organization, you can slightly over-invest, because also the big-ticket savings are coming from the US, visibly and obviously. So you cannot have this without the US on board, otherwise the business case is not really flying. Does this answer? Yeah. Reuse rate. Yes, we are measuring it, of course. It's not where we want it to be. We are tracking around 30 to 40%, which is not bad on corporate core content. But in all transparency, also only a fraction of the entire content is defined as corporate core. And this is where we have a little bit of a question mark, and we are digging into it. So why are we doing all this if only this is considered corporate core? But these are the discussions we are actually having and ongoing as we speak. Any further questions otherwise? Davide?
What are your thoughts when generative AI comes to play, and how does this work now with that coming? Because it is coming.
That's a good question. We started to, and I don't have a satisfactory answer to you. This is early days. We are still in very early experimentation stages. We started to explore these AI topics in the MedInfo space, also in the knowledge management space, yeah, where you can create very smart abstracts across a universe of of academic journal articles and the like. But we are nowhere close to figure out a real use case that we would be able to scale. So I know it's not a satisfactory answer, but that's all I know. And I'm not going to imagine something here, yeah? I don't know today. Thank you. That's it? Okay, good.